Alright guys, so in this video we're going to talk about what Angular actually is. Now most of you probably know this and have even worked with some version of Angular in the past, but this course was created to bring people from zero to hero, so we're going to be starting from scratch. Now I realize many of you already know some of this stuff, but I'd still urge you to watch the course in full. If anything, it'll just be a good refresher. So what exactly is Angular? Angular is a front-end or client-side JavaScript framework which was created and is still maintained by Google. It's used to build incredibly powerful front-end applications. Front-end meaning that it runs on the client side, on the user's computer. Now it is possible to run Angular on a server using something like Universal, but first and foremost it's a client-side framework. It can be used along with just about any back-end service. It works really well with RESTful APIs. Angular 4 has a really intuitive HTTP component to make requests to get responses from a back-end server. And this could be a server built on Node.js or PHP, Ruby on Rails, just about any server-side technology. Angular is also a crucial part of the very popular MEAN stack. This stands for MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node.js. MongoDB is a very powerful NoSQL document database. Express is a backend framework, and Node.js is a JavaScript runtime that runs on Google's V8 JavaScript engine. So it's essentially JavaScript on the server. So all of these technologies combined make for one of the best web stacks to build applications on. All right. Now the versions of Angular can be a little confusing. And have even caused some developers to move on and learn something else instead. So I'm going to dedicate the whole next section to explaining this, but for now, just know that there's AngularJS or Angular 1, Angular 2, and then the latest version, which is Angular 4. Okay, but we'll talk more about that later. So you may already be building apps with plain JavaScript or something else, jQuery. So what are some of the reasons why you would want to use Angular in development? So Angular is a great framework for rapid front-end development. Things that are incredibly complicated to handle with plain JavaScript, like routing, AJAX requests, validation, all that stuff, is really simple with Angular, and it's baked into the framework. Not only that, but we have code generation and scaffolding tools with Angular CLI. We can generate components, services, routes, and so on. So like with any other framework, Angular organizes your code very neatly. It breaks functionality up into individual components. For example, your navigation bar could be one component, then you have your blog post, which could be another, the search bar, and even the single blog post could be their own component. All right, now we can also create services that can reach across all your components, and they can send and receive data. So not only is this helpful to you, but it's also helpful to anyone else that's going to be working with your code. The Angular framework has often been described as what HTML would have looked like if it were created for dynamic applications rather than just static websites. Directives can be used as custom tags, and then we can write dynamic functionality from within JavaScript. So instead of just having static HTML markup, we can have templates that have things like variables, as well as control structures like conditionals, if statements, loops, things like that. Angular is also completely cross-platform. It doesn't matter if your application is being viewed on Windows or Mac or Linux. It doesn't matter if it's in Chrome or Firefox, Edge, or any other browser. All that stuff is handled for you within Angular. Another really great thing about Angular is it also includes testing. You can write unit tests to make sure that all the functionality that you need is there and running correctly. So let's take a look at some of the core features of Angular. Now you may have experience with other JavaScript frameworks. There's too many to even count right now. There's React, Vue.js, Ember, and there's pros and cons to all of these technologies, including Angular. But one thing that I can say about this framework is that it packs more into the core framework than any others that I've worked with. For instance, React isn't even described as a framework, it's more of a library. This means that if you want to add things like routing or AJAX functionality or something else, you need to use some kind of third-party extension. With Angular, all that stuff is completely baked in. And yes, it's a little more bloated, but it does give you much more to work with. Okay, and these are some of the things that you'll find in the core framework. So we have components, services, there's a complete router, there's unit testing tools, build tools, data binding from the model to the template and vice versa, dynamic templates, an HTTP module to make requests to a backend server, observables and data streams, a forms module with validation, directives and custom HTML tags, pipes and filters, as well as code generators and even some animation. So all of these things are included when you install Angular 4. Alright, so there's two main ways to get Angular 4 up and running. So throughout this course, we'll be using the Angular CLI, or the command line interface. This is the recommended way of setting up Angular 4. It generates the entire structure for us and also gives us some commands to do things like generate components and services, as well as build out your application and get it ready for deployment. So another way of setting up Angular with TypeScript is by using the Quick Start seed, which is available on GitHub. So this is kind of like a boilerplate or a starter application with all the files and folders that you need to get started. All right, like I said, we'll be using the CLI, but I do want to show you how to set up the Quick Start seed as well. So before we set up Angular, we're going to have to install Node.js, which is a JavaScript runtime. It also comes with NPM, or Node Package Manager. NPM is used to install modules and packages, including Angular. Now, I'm not going to go deep into Node.js, but I will show you how to install it and get started. Some other things that we're going to be installing is Visual Studio Code for our text editor, Git and Git Bash, which is a better command line for Windows. And we're also going to be installing the Angular 4 plugin for VS Code. Alright, so hopefully you're ready to get started and learn everything about Angular 4. In the next video, I'm going to explain the whole Angular version situation that can kind of confuse some developers. So I will see you in the next video.